Good afternoon and welcome to another live stream here on DreamBank's Facebook page. My name is Andy Frisky and LinkedIn page too now. Sorry about that. Hello, LinkedIn viewers. My name is Andy Frisky. I am a senior dream curator at DreamBank here in Madison, Wisconsin, and really excited to introduce our featured speaker today. But before I go ahead and do that, I want to welcome all the viewers out there, both returning as well as new viewers. If this is your first time tuning in, I'd like to share with you a little bit about as to who we are and why we are here. So DreamBank is a free community resource that is put on by American Family Insurance. The whole reason why we exist is to help inspire dreamers in their dream pursuit. And in large part, we do that through the programs that we offer. So we host right around 25 free virtual events a month since we've been under the pandemic, which are organized into 11 different buckets. Anything ranging from Dream Big, which is our inspiration, motivational wellness speaker series. We host events in Spanish. We have family-related activities. We host a crafting series as well, too, in addition to a business series, which is what this event happens to fall under. So if you're viewing this on our Facebook page, go ahead and press that events tab, and that'll give you a good, concise idea as to what we have upcoming, as well as everything that we have done since about the end of March is when we started going all virtual. We also have started streaming events on our LinkedIn page, and we have a nice collection of our events on our YouTube page as well. So some different outlets there. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our featured speaker today, though, Frank Poggio. So Frank's presented at DreamBank before on topics such as getting the interview and nailing it. Today, he's going to be talking about So You Want to Be a Consultant. Please help me welcome Frank. Frank, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Glad to do this again. Hopefully everybody finds it helpful. There's a little bio of me. I'm not going to go through that and bore you to death, so we'll just move right on. This presentation entitled So You Want to Be a Consultant or a Gig Worker, I kind of use those words interchangeably, which is what's happened in the industry. There's obviously different kinds of consulting, but we're going to focus more on the gig work side, since that seems to be where things are going these days. And if you've done any gig work in the past, just in the chat room, put a yes in there, and Andy is going to give me the synopsis as we move along. So what are we going to cover in the next hour? Hopefully we can get through these 9 topics. We're going to talk about gig work versus consulting, the right or wrong reasons to get into gig work, how to assess a gig firm, if you will, and what is a gig firm. We're going to talk about negotiating contracts with gig firms and so on. Talk about leverage. What kind of leverage might you have in that negotiation? To go over some questions, critical questions that you would want to ask the firm before signing on. We're going to look at personal attributes. Are you suited to get into the gig work world, if you will? And one of the things we're going to go through in a little bit of detail is hourly rates. What is a fair hourly rate that you could charge or expect as a consultant or gig worker? And one question we might be able to answer is gig work a good way to get into a full-time position? So moving right along. Why do people want to get into gig work these days? I have been involved in job search training now for over 10 years since I retired from my regular positions. And I've done a fair amount of coaching for the job search folks. And one of the things I hear if they're currently employed is, I want to do gig work because I hate my current job. I don't like my boss. I don't like my commute. I'm not getting paid enough, and all those other kinds of complaints, if you will, or rationales. If they're in job search, maybe you've been in job search too long and you're getting frustrated. So you think gig work is a faster way to find the position. Maybe you're tired of rejection in that job search. You're always coming in second or third, and here again, a gig opportunity might come along. or nobody is hiring now, everybody wants gig workers. Maybe you got an offer, but you can't move out of state. So you have a nice offer, but they want you to move to Texas or something, and you, for family or other reasons, can't or don't want to do that. So perhaps there might be an opportunity as a contractor gig worker instead. And then lastly, the reason I hear with some frequency is I got bills to pay. I've been in job search for months, and the bills are coming due, and this is a way to make some revenue and cover those expenses. Fact of the matter is, if that's why you're getting into gig work, they're all the wrong reasons. The reasons why you want to get into gig work are these. You're recruited by an established or reputable firm, so you have something that's obviously marketable. You have specialized expertise that's in demand. You like and want change in assignments and environments. You want more control over your professional and work hours and career and so on. Maybe you like to travel. Some gig positions do require some travel, not quite as much in the recent past, but before the pandemic, many gig workers were on the road, either full-time or part-time. Hopefully you enjoy risk, because as you'll see as I go through this, there's a fair amount of risk in gig work. And number 7 is one that most people don't think about. If you move into gig work and think it's your future, you may find out that it's not your cup of tea. And you really need to have a fallback plan. So if you're getting into it for the first time, you should sit down and think through, what if this doesn't work out for whatever reason? It could be a personal decision, it could be financial, it could be whatever, but what is your fallback plan is something you need to have. Those are the right reasons to get into gig work, as opposed to the earlier slide. Let's talk about why companies use or bring on gig workers. Obviously, in many situations, and particularly the technical world, the type of labor might be hard to find, and they turn to an outside firm to supply that labor. Or where they're finding the labor is priced too high, and they're trying to control those costs. Also, a firm may want to eliminate recruitment costs. Many times, particularly in professional decisions, professional hiring, the recruiting firm gets 30% of the first year's salary. So if the first year's salary, in round numbers, is $100,000, right off the bat, the hiring firm has to pay $30,000, $33,000 to get that person on board the day they start. Another reason is lower cost of total labor. As I mentioned a moment ago, maybe the labor is simply priced too high that you're looking for in your area. Another reason is the company wants to try before they buy. Maybe they think an individual might work out, but we're really not sure. Or maybe we don't know if we really need this position full-time, or it's going to grow into a full-time position. So we'll do the try before we buy. The 6th one is for short-term flexibility, and that goes a little bit back to the try before you buy. Many technological firms who are in R&D work of various kinds simply need flexibility. So when you need somebody in here for 6 months to help get this thing rolling, solve a very technical problem, and we don't know whether we're going to need them, but if I have a gig worker, I have that flexibility of basically terminating that role, if you will, when it's convenient for me, the employer, as opposed to having to deal with a full-time employee. Excuse me. And the last one is reduced risk, which basically kind of runs through all those 6, because I can make a fast decision to bring somebody on or take somebody out, and that there's far little risk in that, since I'm not responsible as an employer for benefits and maybe some other things. And maybe the project just doesn't work out. Maybe the new product or whatever it is doesn't fly, so to speak. And this reduces the risk of having to make the investment, so it's in the employee. I'd like to talk about the difference between body shops, the contractor, and the client, because those are the cast of characters, if you will. The body shop, or sometimes referred to as the lease worker firm, is essentially the middleman in this situation. They recruit specialized talent to meet specific client needs. And the contractor, which is you as the gig worker, is neither an employee of the body shop and you're not an employee of the client. The client signs a contract with the body shop, with a lease worker firm, for a specific period of time, for perhaps a very specific project. The contractor, again, you, the gig worker or consultant, if you want to use that descriptor, you're an independent individual that's working for a very specific hourly rate or per diem. And you, the contractor, bear all the expenses, taxes, and risk of continued employment. So that risk element that I mentioned earlier has been transferred from the client, if you will, the company, to you, the contractor, and the body shop, if you will, the lease worker organization, bears little or no of that risk. What types of consulting or gig roles are there typically? Well, there's three levels that I look at: the high level, the technical level, and general support. The high level is you can get gig workers, if you will, or contract workers, in executive management. Maybe you've had some turnover in your executive suite, CEO, vice president. You need somebody to fill a need for a short-term basis, and that's obviously a high-level gig role that a senior manager, if you will, take on. It could be because of acquisitions. You need somebody for short-term business development, or the federal government has a program or something that, again, is also short-term. Most of your gig workers today are in the technical area, where it's specific projects, assignments within something in engineering. It could be chemical engineering, manufacturing engineering, information technology, finance, personnel, supply chains, another big one these days, production, service delivery, or even sales. Most of your gig workers are going to be in that arena, which is where I will spend most of my time focusing on. But you also have gig workers in what I call the general support level. And that essentially is call center folks. You got telemarketeers that you might bring in on a short-term basis, bill collectors, and other kinds of frontline workers. And of course, what you find and see is, in terms of degree of difficulty and hourly rates, pay, if you will, the higher the level, the more money that's involved, the more difficult it is to find people in those arenas. So the hourly rates that you would expect go up as you go up this scale. Quick word about COVID. Given the pandemic, more and more employers want gig worker arrangements because, in a nutshell, they want to trade capital for labor. Labor is very expensive, and as I mentioned earlier, it could be hard to find and so on, and there's risk involved with it. And given what happened over the last 18 months, more firms are looking at gig arrangements, consulting arrangements, if you will, than ever in the past. And because of the pandemic, more folks are working from home and like it. And they want to keep working from home, at least on a full, if not a full-time, a part-time basis. And what many firms are basically saying at this point, if you want to work at home, why don't we set you up as an independent contractor, a gig worker, if you will. Lease worker firms, or gig firms. What are they? Where do you find them? Well, on the web, there are clearinghouses. There's one called Upwork, Odesk, W Worker, Guru. Just do a simple Google search and you'll see at least a dozen clearinghouses that show up. And those clearinghouses are not necessarily firms, they're essentially websites, if you will. And they will simply take a percentage of whatever they help you find. So a business will go out there and say, we need a specialist in X. And, just like in LinkedIn, you go out there and say, I have this experience, I'm looking for work. And the two get together through Upwork or W Worker or Guru, whatever. And Guru, if you will take a percentage of whatever your hourly rate is as their compensation for helping you find that, find that role. Not unlike a Uber or one of those situations. Classic search firms, Robert Half, all the major national search firms have gotten into gig worker arrangements, primarily because that's what the companies they contracted with wanted. And they, of course, saw a growing market for this as opposed to the classic help find an place and find an employee. IT staffing firms, there are national ones and there are local ones. They're all over the place. There's probably thousands of them out there. Tata, Apex, IBM, Tech, Analysis International. Again, just Google IT staffing firms. You can do it for local situations. You can do it nationally. You can do it by state. And you will get a myriad of firms in the IT world that do staffing and gig work arrangements or looking for gig work arrangements. Then you have individual organizations. A lot of size businesses today, as I said earlier, in some respect, due to the pandemic, are looking to hire a certain percentage of gig workers as opposed to routine employees, just to give them the flexibility they need. They may or may not go through a gig firm or a lease worker firm. They may be handling it directly. So if you're interested in gig work, you don't need to necessarily go through a firm or a website. You could communicate with local employers and see if they hire folks on a contract basis. And then, of course, you have the standard consulting and CPA firms. They use gig workers all the time, particularly for specialized needs. So they may pick up a contract to do some supply chain work, if you will, for a client. And as part of their normal consulting, they will find 2, 3, 4 gig workers who are experts in a certain element of supply chain and place those people in that company for a short period of time. So those are just some of the places you could look. Okay, let's assume you're going to work through a lease worker gig firm, if you will, and maybe they found you or you found them, however it turned out. The question becomes, how do you know these firms are good places to hang your hat, so to speak, or sign your contract? So here's a series of questions and things to look at if you're going to deal with a firm. How long have they been in business? It's very easy to set up a gig worker firm. I mean, it's almost no investment. It's all, do I have enough bodies? Do I have enough contacts? And can I place one in the other? So how long have they been doing this? Who are their major clients? What's their contract renewal rates? What kinds of projects do they focus on, specialize in? Are they specialized or focused? And what does that mean for the kind of work that you do? What's the typical length of a project? Is it 3 months, 6 months, 3 years? What is it? This is information you need to get before you sign on the dotted line. What's the current number of active contractors they have, and by type of background and technology. So if you're interested in a particular area of IT, do they do they have enough contracts with clients in that arena? Because if they don't, then you're the first agile programmer worker they picked up, then that might mean something in terms of them being able to place you in a timely way. Number 7, how many salespeople does this firm have? Is there a marketing staff? Very small ones may not have a sales staff. I'll mention that later. Before you make a decision, get the names of 3 of their current contractors or gig workers and talk to those folks and ask them, how much work have they seen? How is it working for this organization? What kind of support, if any, would you get? You would want to ask the firm what kinds of projects you're going to be assigned to, typical client, what's the expected length. Here, a key question is asking, when they answer the question about, here's the companies we have contracts with, and here's where you're going to be placed, is that an active contract or a soon-to-be contract, or what salespeople like to refer to as done deals? Any day now, we will get this contract and you will be placed. I can tell you horror stories about folks that have signed on with gig worker firms, went to the office the first day and and had resigned from their previous position, and were told when they showed up at the door, "Oh, we're sorry, we didn't get that contract." And you, in so many words, are left in a lurch. So you really need to know, if they're going to place you at company X, is there a real active contract with company X, or are they hoping to get it? You want to know any benefits, insurance benefits, whatever. Are there any group plans available? What about specialized equipment? Do you need any specialized equipment? Who's going to supply it? How about training? If there's new things to be learned, are they going to supply any training, or are you going to have to get yourself trained and be able to keep up, so to speak, with the new technologies? You're going to want to see a sample work agreement or contract before you sign it. For the hopefully obvious reason, we'll go through some of that in a little bit of detail in a minute. And here they are. So when you look at that contract, things you need to be looking for, and you may want to get a lawyer involved in this, depends on your own background, it wouldn't hurt. One of the main things is non-compete, particularly in the world of technology. What other restrictions? What if that client wants to hire you as a regular employee? Will they be able to do that, or are there restrictions on that? Can you work with other gig firms, or can you do outside work on your own? There may be restrictions. You need to know that before you sign on. The timing and duration. How long does this contract go for? What happens at the end of it? Do you have the right to refuse a project? If they come along and say, "Hey, we got a new client, project 1, 2, 3, and we're going to put you on it," you may not be comfortable in that project, and you may want to be able to refuse it. And of course, there might be implications to that. Termination. Either during your contract or during a client contract, can you walk away? Can they walk away? Who needs to give notice? How much notice, if any? And it must be a two-way situation. Can you recruit their other contractors? This is an interesting one. So you work for gig firm A, and you leave them at the end of a year and you go to gig firm B. There may be restrictions in that contract where you can't go back to gig firm A's contractors and try to bring them over to gig firm B. So again, may not mean anything to you at this point, but it's something you're going to want to know about before you sign. And I mentioned this a minute ago. What if you get a job offer from a client? What are the implications? In some cases, the firm might say, "That's okay, but the client's going to have to pay us 30%. Well, you don't have to pay it, but that might make the hiring or the company that's using you think twice about bringing you on board full time. Number two, insurance, liability insurance. Is it required, particularly in technological jobs? You're in medical research, you're in engineering, whatever it might be. The gig firm may want you to carry liability insurance, and you will have to pay for it. How much? And typically, it's $1 million, $2, $3, $4 million, and those policies can run up in cost into the hundreds of dollars, maybe $1,000. In some cases, a gig firm will have a group policy available. So they already have a policy, a master policy with insurance, with an insurance company, and you can come under that. You have to pay the premium, but they basically get you a group rate, which is nice. It's typically less expensive. But the question then becomes, who's primary on that policy? So if something goes wrong, you may be primary, or the gig firm may be. Again, it needs to be worked out. Here's an really important one in the world of technology, particularly in IT and engineering. Intellectual property. Who owns the intellectual property that you might develop while you're on a contract with business A or business B? All right. Design development, past, present, and future is important. So you may come to the table with expertise in a very narrow area, and maybe 5 years ago or whatever, you came up with a new approach, a new design, a new technique, and now you're applying that. Well, there are some of these gig contracts that in so many words say, anything you bring to the table, we own. Even though you developed it, you created it 5 years ago. In so many words, you may have even gotten a patent on it, and they may now not own that patent, but they have the rights to use that patent because you used it while you were working for them on a contract with a client. This is an extremely difficult area, particularly in the technological fields, that you really want to spend some time thinking about, particularly if you do any kind of design work. Number four, do they pay overtime and bonuses? Some firms will pay you overtime. As a salaried employee, it's a 40-hour work week, supposedly. You may put in 50 hours or 60 hours, and you don't get overtime because you're a salaried employee. Well, in some good gig arrangements, they will actually pay you for those 60 hours you worked that week. Now, the second question is, are you paid the straight rate, or you get time and a half, which is what typical overtime rate? Just another question to ask. And or are there any kind of bonuses at the end of a project, or performance-based or whatever? Again, some things you need to ask about. Number five, travel and other expenses. Is travel available? Are there limits? Do you need any kind of approval? So if you're working with a business client and they wanted you to go travel to a foreign country or Texas or whatever it might be to work with other folks in their shop, who pays for that? And what are the limits, if any, and what kinds of approvals may be required? Commuting costs. Some of these companies want you to be in their office as a contractor. Will they pay for commuting costs, or is that coming out of your hide? Keeping in mind, one of the benefits you saw or thought you saw when you went into gig work was there was no commuting. You could work from home. Well, there are some gig arrangements that will require you to be at that office so many hours a day, so many days a week, whatever it might be. As mentioned earlier, special equipment, who's responsible, who pays? How about the working environment in the locale? Are you allowed to work from home? If so, how much? Or must you work out of the office? One of the advantages to gig work is you are an independent. You are a business unto yourself. And when you work from home, you clearly have the rights to take the home tax deduction from the IRS. But if your employer, so to speak, or in this case, your contract client, requires you to work from their office and supplies you with equipment, you may put that deduction in jeopardy. So you may want to spend some time with your tax accountant based upon whatever this contract says. Time reporting. How much time reporting do you need to do? How's it done? How's it tracked? Is there any verification required? Are you required to be on site? Gets back to the question about working from home, and if so, how many? And again, as I mentioned, that there are tax deduction implications based upon the answers to those questions. Okay, so that covers some of the contract issues that you would want to cover when you look at the contract that the gig outfit, if you will, hands you. Well, we're going to talk about the rate. What are they going to pay you? The first answer to that question deals with leverage or value. How much leverage do you have? And that, in part, will drive the hourly rate. The other part is basic arithmetic, which we'll go through in a minute. That value is related to that little scale on the bottom. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a high demand area, such as robotics engineer, virologist today, obviously, artificial intelligence, agile development, biomedical engineering, and so on. If you're in one of those areas, you have value. You are in need. You have demand, if you will. On the other hand, if you are in some of these areas, web developer, Java programmer, COBOL programmer, those kinds of areas, there's moderate demand. It's a technical area, but today there's plenty of web developers. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you were a web developer, you were in high demand. If you were a Java programmer 10 or 15 years ago, you were in high demand. Well, guess what? Many of the technical schools and colleges started courses in web development and Java and so on. And so it's not a bad place to be, but your relative value is not what it would be in a high demand area. And then, of course, at the lowest level, we have everyday labor, which are folks that do call center stuff, telemarketing, and so on. Their hourly rate is going to be the lowest. Okay, leverage. I've mentioned it several times. How do you know if you have leverage? Well, it depends upon these 7 things. What industry are you in? Are there critical timelines in that industry? What are the regulations in the industry? Have they been changing? Is it dealing with safety, OSHA requirements, and so on that are changing? Or outages, so you all probably read in the paper about the oil pipeline company Colonial that got hit with that recent hack and shutting down the oil line. Well, if you are doing anything in the security area of IT and have any kind of a track record, you're in the right industry at the right time. The other side is in industry at the right time is regulation. The tax laws have been yo-yoed for the last 4 or 5 years and being yo-yoed again. So if you're a tax accountant and you're keeping up and so on, you could be in the right industry at the right time. Specialized knowledge, technical, legal, industry, and so on. Again, my example of this IT security would fit there. Do you have experience with and knowledge with cutting edge tools? Various management tools, maybe supply chain tools, technical tools, development tools, engineering tools, whatever it might be. Next question is the labor market that you're in. Is it primarily inshore or is it inshore and offshore? Because in some, particularly many of the IT areas these days, there's plenty of offshore talent that's undercutting the hourly rates. And that could reduce, if you will, your leverage if you happen to be like that COBOL programmer I mentioned earlier, or the web developer is a good example where many organizations that want contract workers will go offshore because The world is full of web developers today. Next one is, are there any competing contractor firms that you could talk to? So if you're going to talk to gig firm A that maybe specializes in chemical engineering, is there another firm that you either in your locale, or these days it really doesn't have to be in your locale, but if you should be talking to another firm, gig firm that specializes in that area to give you some leverage? Do you have a track record of being able to learn quick and apply quicker? Many of these areas, which I've already mentioned, are technological. The technology is changing, or in the case I mentioned earlier, the tax accountant and so on, supply chain. Can you learn quick? Can you apply quicker? Gives you leverage. And of course, being able to show examples of that is what you need to do. And last but not least, a gig firm will pay you a premium if they think or believe that you can open doors to new sales opportunities. So maybe you spent 10 years working for General Electric or whoever, or IBM or whatever, and you know some folks at those organizations, you've got some contacts, and this gig firm has been trying to sell their services to that company. If the gig firm believes you could help open doors, they will pay a little bit more of a premium for you than the next guy coming in. Okay, let's talk about the hourly fees, hourly rates. Now remember, your value for a higher rate is going to be in part a function of leverage. The answer to those previous 7 questions. So let's go through a little example here. Some basic mechanics of the fee math, your hourly rate. Let's assume, for the sake of example, we'll use a nice round number, $100,000 a year is the salary you're getting today. You're working as a app developer or a chemical engineer or a mechanical engineer, whatever you are, and you're getting paid $100,000 a year salary, and you want to do gig work. You want to go off on your own, so to speak, and see the world. Well, $100,000 is approximately $50 an hour, given 2,000 hours per year. I'm doing some rounding here, obviously. So you say, well, I got to get at least $50 a year. Well, wait a minute. In addition to that $50 a year, there are some things you're going to have to pay for that you weren't paying for, such as, excuse me, certain income taxes, Social Security, for example. As a salaried employee, your employer pays half your Social Security, you pay the other half. Roughly speaking, it's about 7.6%, I believe, something like that. So we'll round it to 8%. So you're still going to have to pay your 8%, but you're also going to have to pay the second 8% that your employer is paying. So there's 8% of costs that you're going to have to pick up. You're also going to have to pay for your own benefits, health insurance. Health insurance for a standalone policy for a middle-aged person today is typically $10,000 in round numbers. If you're lucky enough to have a spouse or a partner that can get you on their plan and they're in a salary position, you may be able to significantly reduce that, and that's fine if you can do it, but there's still going to be an increment for insurance. Unemployment insurance, there's going to be no unemployment insurance. You work for a gig firm and they, quote, lay you off. You can't go to the state unemployment office and say, I want to file for unemployment insurance. You can't do that because you never paid it because you were an independent contractor and the gig firm never paid it because you weren't their employee. Retirement, there's no retirement benefit. So if you expect to retire someday and you want to sock away some money in an IRA, 401k, whatever it might be, you have to make that contribution on your own. There's no pay for holidays, right? If you take off New Year's, well, you don't get paid for New Year's. Training, If you need some extensive training or you want to learn some new technologies, new techniques, you pay for it. Vacation, take all the vacation you want, you pay for it. So if you look at that package of benefits, if you will, and other costs, that equates to roughly on average 20% of a person's salary. So if I take that $50 an hour, add the 8% for Social Security, 20% for benefits, the rate is now $66 an hour, but we're not done yet. You can't expect to be working full time because that body shop will not guarantee you a full-time job. They may say this is a 1-year contract as long as it's renewed after the second 6 months. Or they may say this contract is good for 6 months and we're hoping to get it renewed, but there are no guarantees. And the client won't guarantee it for a full year either, at least with you. They may do it with the firm, with the gig firm, but they're not going to guarantee you a full-time paycheck. So you have to factor in a risk factor here. Remember, we talked earlier about one of the reasons why companies do this is to lay off the risk. Then you're laying the risk off on you. So you have to simply assume that you may not be working 2,000 hours. And if you can get through that year at 60%, maybe if you're lucky, 70%, you've done really well. And so if you factor that downtime in, that takes you up to $109 an hour. And then, still not done, you should add another 10% for what I call basic business expenses. Remember, we talked about the tax situation, so you may have to hire a tax accountant. We talked about maybe you getting a lawyer to go through all that contract stuff to try to protect you. It may be computer costs, supply costs, internet costs, phone costs, accounting and tax, office supplies, legal. That could add up to another 10% easily. So if you throw that in, you are now at $120 an hour gig rate. That gets you, with some degree of certainty, at a salary of $100,000 a year, which was the job you are leaving to become a gig worker. So if you accept a gig position for anything less than that, you are taking on risk. You can do it if you want. I mean, obviously there are gig arrangements out there that'll pay you less than $120 an hour, and there's plenty of them. But that means you are taking on the risk. Okay. But then again, if you have leverage, you can get more than $120 an hour. There are gig workers that are up close to $200 an hour in the right position at the right time, the right technology, and so on. And there are gig workers who are down in the 80s and 90s in technical fields for various and sundry reasons, particularly if you're a COBOL programmer or you're a web developer or something along those lines. So that's a guideline for you. If, as they say, if you don't believe you can get the 120 an hour, all I'm telling you is you're taking on the risk, and hopefully it'll work out for you. Okay, gig firms, recruiters. You have to take recruiters with a grain of salt because a recruiter in a gig firm has several goals. The first goal is to find resources or warm bodies, line up potential contractors, because if I can keep a full bullpen when the sales guy is out trying to sell a contract, and that company says we need a specialist in this type of chemistry, they have somebody in the bullpen, either on staff or could be on staff, that they can say, we got that individual, we can get him here in a week or two. Most likely in that situation, they've also already talked about some kind of rate range, okay, for what the company is going to pay the gig outfit. Now, when I went through that little arithmetic and I said, you ought to be looking at 120 an hour to break even on a $100,000 salary, that gig firm is billing you out at a minimum of $180 an hour, maybe $200 an hour. So many of the gig firms bill people out at multiples of what they pay them. And the minimum multiple that I've seen is a multiple usually around 2. So, and that's of course negotiating with the company. And it's it can be a competitive market. So the salesperson, they already said to that company, well, we can get you somebody for $150 an hour. Now they find you and you tell them you want $170 an hour for that leverage that you have. And what the recruiter is going to be telling you, well, the most we can pay is $110 an hour because he has to make money on that 150. All right. And he doesn't want to overpay you because then he's going to lose money. So you got to be real careful when you're talking to these recruiters because in some cases they've already made promises that they're trying to keep. And of course, the other thing with these recruiters is almost everything is a done deal. So if you were to ask that question I raised earlier, is this a real contract you have or is it a contract that might come in? The answer might come back as, well, it's a done deal. Don't worry about it. Well, my advice to you is worry about it. And in smaller firms, the recruiters also serve as new client sales force. So you got the guy who's trying to recruit people, recruit bodies, who's also trying to sell those bodies to companies to fill out his sales quota. A little bit of a conflict of interest there. So the cheaper he can get a body in, the more likely he's going to get that sale. Okay. Freelance or gig consulting on your own. This is if you want to set up your own little gig firm. You're not going to go through a third party. And I'm going to kind of go through this pretty quick because we're running a little late here. But if you do it on your own, not through a gig firm, the benefit is you call the shots, you're your own boss, and potential for higher income. And there's some tax benefits that we talked about. The offside is the customer really is the boss, and the income is a high-risk income, and you have to deal with the taxes and maybe pay a tax accountant and so on. The pro is you work when you want, and it's a low cost of entry. There's no big capital expenditure you're going to make to get into this business. On the offside, the customer demands your time. Investment is lost salary, personal time, travel costs. The pro is you control sales. There's no unrealistic promises. So that example I gave you earlier about the sales guy making promises either in terms of the rate or maybe the salesperson says, oh yeah, we can get this done in 3 months. And then they plug you into it and say, you got to do it in 3 months. And you shake your head and go, ain't going to happen. That doesn't happen because you control the sales. And of course, doing gig work is not boring because in some respects, you don't know what's going to be around the next corner. Hopefully it's something challenging, interesting, and lucrative. But on the offside, since there's no unrealistic sales promises, but you're the one who's doing the selling. Remember, you're running your own business here. You're not going through a third-party firm or a gig firm. And on the not boring element, well, yeah, it's not boring, but it's actually unpredictable hours and predictable projects, which could be exciting. You get to define your benefit package. So if you don't need health insurance, you could save money there, avoid it. If you don't care about vacation, you don't need to take vacations. And there's no interruptions, always focus, no committees to deal with, none of that big business, get lost in the shuffle stuff. But on the offside, you can define your benefit package, but you pay for all your benefits, including your vacations. You know, when you're on vacation, you're not billing, you're literally on vacation. And about the interruptions, well, that's true, but there is little or no support system. There's no coworker morale boosters. There's no attaboys. So that's what it looks like if you go for it on your own. Now, if you go through a body shop, it's very similar, but there are some differences. For starters, The one about you call the shots, no, you don't call the shots. The shop where the customer is the boss. The higher income is true, but then again, just like before, it's risky and there's no unemployment compensation if you, quote, don't have work. Work when and where you want, that doesn't happen because the customer demands your time. Your contract, your gig firm can make demands on your time. Low cost of entry, that's true, but on the other side, the investment is lost salary, personal time, and maybe travel costs. About the sales question, you control the sales? Well, not really. In this case, the positive is you must sell. Excuse me. Previously, you had to sell. Now you don't have to sell. So, but you don't control the sales either. So you got that recruiter guy that I talked about a minute ago. He's doing the selling, and you're the one that has to deliver. So that advantage washes out. Not boring. That's still true the way it is. Define your benefit package. Again, that's still true, but you pay for the benefits and the interruptions. Typically there is a gig shop support system, whether it be formal or informal, but it can be highly variable. It's more than what you'd have literally doing it on your own, but it can be highly variable. So those are some of the pros and cons of either working through a gig shop or doing it on your own. 10 steps you need to go through to gig worker. If you're going to do gig work through a body shop, 10 things you need to look at. Identify your niche, research target markets, know your market. You should already know it. Get whatever certifications and licenses that you need. Set short and long-term goals. Build and expand your network, your personal network, your professional network. Get an estimate of your minimum hourly rate. What is your minimum? How much risk are you willing to take? So at least you have a point of negotiation when you talk to that firm. Complete whatever legal tasks. Become an LLC, tax documents, insurances, and so on. Contact and evaluate 2 firms via the web and local contacts. I can't overemphasize this. If you're going to sign up with a gig worker firm, maybe they approached you, however it happened, find 1 or 2 others because that is the best negotiation leverage you're going to have. So negotiate with at least 2 firms. Then check on client contracts. Is it signed? Is it really closed? Or is it almost a done deal? Okay, you want to be a gig worker consultant. There are 12 attributes I find for successful gig worker consultants. And here they are. Strong technical background. You have an independent streak. You have a high tolerance for risk, stress, and rejection, which I've already mentioned several times in terms of that risk. You have a strong network, a strong social media presence. You have strong self-confidence. You're a hard worker, willing to work long hours is no problem. You're a self-starter, a fast learner. You have good communication skills relative to the type of position that you're going to be in. So if you want to be a project manager, your communication skills have to be better than if you're a frontline scientist for verbal, written, and presentation skills. You have to have strong intellectual energy and good situation knowledge. You need to know that industry. You need to know that technology. You need to be a good collaborator because there's no such thing as a lone wolf. Even if you're a gig worker, you still have to communicate with, collaborate with people in the company and people in the gig firm. So you need to be able to handle that little political side of the world. And as I mentioned earlier, have a plan B because it may not be your cup of tea. So with those 12 things, if you want to do your own assessment as to whether or not you're suited for gig work, here's what you do. Go down those 12 things, score each one with a 0 or a 5 or something in between, where 0 is you have little or no experience or competency in it. 3 is you're okay and familiar with it. And 5 is your very strong competency, extensive experience. If you get 50 or more points, go for it. Seems like you're well suited. if you get between 40 and 50 points, you could do it, but you probably ought to shore up or look at some of those weak points. If you get below 40, stick with your current job or your current job search, because this ain't your cup of tea. And if you have 2 or more deal breakers, regardless of your score, then you ought to forget about it. And what are the deal breakers? Here they are. You get 2 of these, and this ain't your world. High tolerance for risk, stress, and rejection. You don't have strong self-confidence. You're not a self-starter, and you're not a fast learner. You missed 2 of those. I don't care what your score is. This is not your cup of tea. And so here we are, almost at the end. Thanks for your attention. And if you want to pursue gig work, I wish you the best of luck. I'm not sure if Andrew has these slides. You can send them out, but if anybody wants them, I'd be happy to send them to you.
Thanks so much for that, Frank. I appreciate the deep dive into the consulting world and, you know, kind of what to expect. And I think that it's great having as detailed of his approach as you shared with people. There is Frank's contact information as well. His email is on the screen. I'll go ahead and I will type that into the chat, though, as well, for anybody viewing this after the fact. I also want to go ahead and open it up to folks right now. If anybody has any questions for Frank as well, too. I know I typed it in the comment section, but I'll go ahead and pass along another call to action in case you had any questions for Frank as well. So there is his email. Want to go ahead and also highlight some of our upcoming events too that we have that may be of interest to you folks. Our business events typically happen every Tuesday from the noon to 1:30 time slot, in addition to our career events. Tomorrow we have our Learning Lab event series too that falls on Wednesdays at the noon time slot. And then Thursday, we have our Dream Big series, Thursday afternoons, our Dream Big series as well. Have a really good event if you have any kiddos at home. Coming up this Thursday evening, the Magic of Isaiah will be talking about some fairy tales and the magic that goes along with that. So really, really good there. It doesn't look like there's any other questions that are coming in right now, Frank, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. Thank you, Frank, for putting that presentation together, and we will see you all next time.